welcome to Reform Thinking. So, um, picture this. You are at the office, or maybe a family gathering, and someone makes a comment directed right at you.
Oh, we have all been there.
Right. And on the surface, the words are, like, completely neutral. It might even be disguised as a compliment,
Yeah.
but you can just feel this sharp, deliberate edge underneath it.
Yeah, that passive-aggressive sting.
Yeah, that is it. Or, think about your time online. You watch someone take a completely innocent social media post, and they actively twist it into the most cynical interpretation possible.
Which happens basically every 5 seconds on the internet.
Pretty much. And usually we just write this off as someone being difficult, or maybe they are just having a bad day.
Right, we brush it off.
But what if the malice you encounter in your daily life is not just a bad mood? What if it is a specific philosophical condition that the ancients diagnosed thousands of years ago?
That is a fascinating way to frame it.
Because today, we are tracking that specific feeling. We are looking at a very particular ancient Greek word for this behavior, which is kakoētheia.
It is quite the word.
It is. And we are going to follow its root word, kakos, all the way from the earliest Greek philosophers to the Old Testament prophets and then right into the New Testament writers. We want to see how these ancient minds grappled with the origin, the nature, and the defeat of evil.
Because, we are looking at a linguistic shift that tracks a massive theological revolution. The Greek and Hellenistic thinkers, they spent centuries categorizing evil.
Try and figure it all out.
Yeah, they wanted to know if it was a cosmic force or maybe a physical substance or, as some of them thought, just a lack of education.
Right.
But the biblical texts took those abstract theories and brought the problem of evil right down into the center of the human heart. To make sense of that shift, we should start with the anatomy of this specific type of malice, kakoētheia.
So let's break that down. What does that word actually mean?
Well, the word itself is a compound. It combines kakos, which is the broad Greek word for bad or evil, with othos, which means character, habit, or disposition.
So it is like a habit of being bad.
That is spot on. We are looking at a habituated badness. It is a basic defect in character that makes a person habitually hurtful to others.
Some of the classical definitions of this word bring it right into focus for us, because Aristotle, in his work on rhetoric, defines kakоētheia as taking everything for the worse.
That is such a piercing definition.
It really is. And then Ammonius, writing around 100 AD, defines it as baseness lurking in the shadows, or hidden evil.
Which sounds incredibly sinister.
Yeah, it does. And the Apostle Paul actually uses this exact word in his letter to the Romans. In Romans chapter 1, verse 29, he places it in this massive catalog of human vices. He wedges kakоētheia right between deceit and gossip.
That placement is so deliberate.
Right. It feels incredibly intentional, because it is not open physical violence. It is this quiet, persistent, toxic disposition.
Yeah, wedging it between deceit and gossip tells you everything about how this vice operates. While Aristotle treated it as a specific vice of interpretation, like you said, taking things for the worse, the popular understanding in the ancient world was a bit broader.
How so?
Well, it encompassed varied mischief and, miscellaneous villainy, but the core concept remains constant. It is an internal disposition that actively works against the good of others.
Got it.
Philo, the Hellenistic Jewish philosopher, he linked it to a hot temper, savage behavior, and harsh sarcasm. It is the desire to hurt, but often executed through specious reasoning or, hidden motives.
Like smiling to your face while stabbing you in the back.
Yeah. Josephus even uses it to describe the serpent in the garden. He says the serpent maliciously persuaded the woman to eat the fruit through kakоētheia. It is calculated, cynical damage.
I think Aristotle's definition, taking everything for the worse, perfectly describes a cynical, modern social filter.
Oh, absolutely.
It is like interacting with someone who actively spins every innocent comment or neutral action into a personal insult.
We all know someone like that.
We do. If you say good morning, they think, what are they trying to get out of me?
Yeah.
If you offer to help with a project, they assume you are implying they are incompetent.
Right, there is no winning with them.
Exactly. I mean, yes, that is it. The malice is not in the action they are observing. The malice is the lens through which they view the entire world. They filter reality through a lens of hostility.
And the person suffering from kakоētheia, they literally cannot accept a good motive. They are fundamentally suspicious of every action around them. But to understand why the ancients cared so much about this specific brand of malice, we have to look at its root word, kakos.
Okay, let's look at kakos.
The Greek world spent an enormous amount of intellectual energy trying to solve the puzzle of why bad things happen at all. This is the classic problem of theodicy.
Okay, wait, look, pause and unpack that word theodicy for a second. That is a heavy philosophical term. What does it actually mean in practice for you, the listener?
Sure. Theodicy is basically the attempt to justify God or the gods in the face of suffering.
Trying to make God look good when things are bad.
Pretty much. If the universe is governed by divine order, or if God is good, how do we explain suffering, weakness, and moral failure? How do we get off the hook for the bad things that happen? And the evolution of the word kakos shows us how their thinking developed on this issue.
How did it start?
Well, originally, in the earliest Greek writings, the word did not even mean moral evil. It just meant an incapacity or a weakness.
Oh, wow. So when you read the earliest Greek texts, kakos just meant poor of its kind.
Right.
So a kakos doctor was not like an evil, murderous physician. It was just a weak physician who could not heal your illness.
Yeah, a bad doctor in the functional sense.
Or a kakos soldier was a coward or someone useless in battle. It was a functional failure. But as Greek thought progressed, it started to take on moral and cosmic weight.
It did.
It became the word for moral wickedness and also the word for absolute disaster or ruin. Which leads us to the classical Greek dilemma. Is this evil, this kakos, sent by the gods, or is it born of human ignorance?
And the early texts show a very stark divide on this question. On one hand, you have Homer, who presents a very specific worldview.
In the Odyssey.
Right. In the Odyssey, there is a clear sentiment that Zeus hands out both good and bad, kakos, by divine necessity. The gods are the authors of human fate, and human fate includes a lot of arbitrary suffering.
So it is just random bad luck handed down from the sky.
Basically. But even within Homer, we start to see a shift happening. There is a moment where Zeus complains that mortals blame the gods for everything.
Oh, the classic "don't blame me" from the top.
Yeah, Zeus says humans bring disaster on themselves through their own reckless actions, usually by ignoring divine warnings. So this introduces the idea of human responsibility.
Interesting.
Later on, the Athenian politician Solon makes a really strong argument that political disaster is a self-incurred misfortune. He tells the city of Athens that ruin is coming because they ignored the warnings. They brought the kakos upon themselves.
Okay, so we have the poets blaming the gods and the politicians blaming the people. Then the philosophers enter the debate, and they come up with a very different solution.
Yes, they do.
Democritus and Socrates both developed theories around this. And their theory is that evil is simply the result of ignorance.
Which is quite the leap.
It is. Democritus says that if you open a person up, you find a storehouse of evils, but these are brought on by a blindness of mind. Socrates takes this even further. He argues that human beings do not do evil voluntarily.
Right, he thought no one wants to be bad.
Yeah. He believed that if humans actually knew what was good, if they possessed true knowledge of virtue, they would naturally do what is good. So the cause of kakos is just a lack of education.
Socrates equated knowledge directly with virtue. He believed that the human will always desires the good. So if someone commits a bad act, they must just be mistaken about what is actually good for them.
Like a math error.
Yeah, they think the bad thing will bring them happiness, which is an intellectual error. And this is a highly, highly optimistic view of human nature, say the least.
It assumes the will is unbroken and only the intellect needs correcting. But Plato, his student, realized this was totally insufficient. Plato looked at the world and saw that irrational passions often overpower rational thought.
People do crazy things even when they know better.
Right. So he theorized that evil was not just ignorance. It was a cosmic force tied to physical matter. For Plato, the corporeal world, the physical stuff the universe is made of, is the source of kakos.
Okay.
He developed this dualism where the spirit is good and the physical body, or matter itself, is the origin of evil.
Wait, let's back up. So Socrates thought malice is just a lack of education. Like if humans just knew what was good, they would never do anything evil.
That is his stance. He thought the issue was purely cognitive. You just need to teach people the right way to live, and the problem of evil just disappears.
I have to push back on that. That is incredibly optimistic. I mean, think about history. Some of the most calculated, cruel schemes were executed by highly educated people.
Oh, for sure. If malice is just ignorance, why does a PhD commit financial fraud? We have all seen brilliant, well-educated people intentionally harm others. Education does not eradicate Kakoētheia.
Sometimes it just gives it better tools.
Yeah, sometimes it makes it more sophisticated. A really sharp mind can invent entirely new ways to take everything for the worse. And then Plato's idea, blaming physical matter, that feels just as flawed to me.
How so?
Well, if the physical body is the source of evil, then literally everything we do in the physical world is bad.
And you are identifying the exact friction in the classical Greek system right there. Blaming physical matter, which is called metaphysical dualism, creates a massive problem for daily life.
It makes everything a sin just by existing.
Yeah, if matter is evil, then normal embodied human life is inherently bad. Eating, working, and raising a family are all tainted simply because they're physical activities. In that system, salvation consists of escaping the body entirely.
Which is pretty bleak.
It is. As history moved forward into the Hellenistic period, and Eastern thought began to mingle with Greek philosophy, the theories became much more cosmic and psychological. We see new systems trying to explain the relentless presence of kakos. One of the most famous attempts comes from the Neoplatonist philosopher Plotinus.
Right, Plotinus.
Yeah.
And he takes a completely different angle. He viewed evil not as an active force and not as physical matter. He viewed it as an absolute lack or an absence of good.
An absence, yeah.
Use this analogy of emanation. If the supreme good is like the sun, then as the light shines outward, it eventually gets weaker and weaker. And at the absolute furthest edge, where the light completely fails, you have darkness.
Just cold darkness.
Exactly. For Plotinus, that darkness is evil. It has no substance of its own. It is just the place where the good is totally absent.
And Plotinus is really just trying to protect the divine from being responsible for evil. If evil has no substance, if it is just a non-being, then God did not create it.
God is off the hook.
Right. God only created the light. The darkness is just the consequence of being really far away from the source.
Let's modernize Plotinus's theory to make sure you, the listener, understand the mechanism here. It is kind of like a Wi-Fi router.
Oh, I like this.
The router is the good.
Yeah.
If you are standing right next to it, you have a perfect signal. You are thriving. But as you walk down the street, away from your house, the signal drops. Eventually, you have no connection at all.
The dreaded dead zone.
Yeah. In Plotinus's mind, evil is not a competing router trying to hack into your phone. Evil is just the dead zone where the Wi-Fi cannot reach.
That analogy clarifies his theory so well, but, other Hellenistic systems completely rejected this idea of evil as a mere absence.
Who rejected it?
Well, Parsiism, better known as Zoroastrianism, they posited a literal pretemporal cosmic war. They believed in two twin spirits. One spirit chose truth, called a Shah. The other spirit chose falsehood, called Drug.
Okay, so a massive conflict.
Yes. In this system, evil is a highly active, conscious force. It has its own armies of demons. Humanity is caught in the middle of a massive cosmic conflict, and every single person must choose a side. The material world is the literal battlefield for these two competing gods.
Man, think about what it would feel like to wake up every day with that worldview. You are not just going to work. You are a foot soldier in a literal cosmic war.
It adds a lot of stress to a Tuesday.
It really does. But, I have a real question about Plotinus's absence theory, the whole Wi-Fi dead zone idea. How does that line up with your actual lived experience of malice?
It doesn't seem to fit, does it?
No. When you encounter true Kakoētheia, it does not feel like a passive shadow. It does not feel like a lack of something. It feels active. It feels aggressive. Malice has real energy.
It takes work to be that mean.
It does. It takes effort to spin someone's words against them. Calling it an absence of good feels like calling a hurricane an absence of calm. It might be technically true in some highly abstract philosophical sense, but it entirely misses the destructive reality of the event.
And Philo, who was a prominent Hellenistic Jewish thinker, recognized that exact same flaw. Philo tried to bridge the gap between Greek philosophy and Jewish theology.
How did he do that?
Well, he absolutely distanced God from evil, stating that the divine is totally free from kakos, but instead of calling evil an illusion or a mere shadow like Plotinus, he located the source of evil squarely in human desire.
Internalizing it.
Yes. He used the Greek word epithymia, which means lust or over-desire. Philo argued that every human soul is born with the capacity for both good and evil. It is our runaway desires that act as the source of malice. So he moves the battleground away from abstract matter and away from cosmic twins. He puts the battleground right inside human motivation.
So while the Greek and Hellenistic worlds were busy categorizing evil as a metaphysical glitch, or a cosmic twin, or a Wi-Fi dead zone, the Hebrew scriptures took an entirely different, shockingly personal approach to the problem.
Totally different.
To understand this, we have to look at the Septuagint. This is the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament. The translators took this loaded Greek word, kakos, and they used it to translate the Hebrew word ra. And when you look at how the Old Testament prophets use this word, the whole framework shifts.
It is a massive pivot.
We leave the realm of abstract philosophy and enter a deeply relational, covenantal theology.
The shift is so jarring if your mind is trained on Greek philosophy. Because in the prophetic view of history, found in books like Jeremiah, Micah, and Deuteronomy, the focus is entirely on the covenant between God and the nation of Israel.
The relationship.
Right. When the prophets speak of kaka, the plural of kakos, meaning evils or disasters, they are talking about political blows. They mean famine, military defeat, and exile. And the prophets make a shocking claim. These disasters are sent by God.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. They are punishments in response to Israel's idolatry and rebellion. God is the active agent bringing the kakos upon the nation.
That is a terrifying thought. I mean, Deuteronomy says, many evils and troubles shall come upon them because they have forsaken their God. Jeremiah says, I will bring evil upon this people, even the fruit of their thoughts.
Right.
It sounds almost like the Homeric view again, where the gods just hand out suffering. But there's a massive difference in the intention behind the action.
What is the difference?
The same God who sends the disaster is also the deliverer from the disaster. The intention behind the visitation of evil is not destruction for the sake of destruction. The intention is to bring the people back to their senses.
Oh, that makes sense.
The goal is to turn them away from idolatry and to restore them to peace. God uses the disaster as an extreme wake-up call.
So the prophets resolve the problem of theodicy not with metaphysical dualism, but with the sovereignty of God over history. Disasters are the response of God's righteous judgment to human guilt within a covenant framework.
Like breaking a contract.
Think of it like a treaty between a king and his subjects. If the subjects rebel, the king enforces the penalties written right into the treaty. But because God's nature is merciful, the disasters are teleological.
Hold on, let's define teleological, meaning the disasters have a specific end goal or purpose. It is not just random lightning strikes of divine anger.
That is correct. Teleological means moving toward a specific, planned goal. Jeremiah specifically says that God has thoughts of peace and not of evil to give you an expected end. The disaster is a severe mercy. It is designed to break the cycle of self-destruction that the nation has locked itself into.
I think the best way to understand this is to compare the prophetic view of God sending kaka to a surgeon performing a major operation.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you look at a surgery out of context, it looks like an act of extreme violence.
True.
The surgeon is causing intense physical trauma. They are cutting the body open. That is a bad event. It is physical damage. But the intention behind that trauma is to cut out a deadly tumor.
The context changes everything.
Right. The goal of the violence is ultimate healing. The prophet's view is that idolatry is a terminal cancer in the life of the nation. The political disaster is the surgery required to save the patient. The pain is intense, but the alternative is total death.
It is a really severe intervention. And this concept of a stark choice between life and death is amplified in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, specifically the book of Proverbs.
Oh, Proverbs is great for this.
The Greek translators of Proverbs injected a rigid ethical binary into the text. They took the Hebrew concepts and framed them as a constant choice between two distinct paths. Evil is personified as folly.
Lady Folly.
Yes, she is called Kakabulo, the evil counselor, and this counselor has her dwelling in death and Hades. The text presents a stark, unavoidable choice for you. You either choose the way of wisdom, which leads to life, or the way of the bad, which leads to death.
It is interesting that translators of Proverbs use the word kakos nearly 100 times.
That is a lot.
It is. That is almost double the amount of the original Hebrew text.
Yeah.
They're aggressively categorizing everything. You are either righteous or you are bad. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
And they located the origin of this badness right in the human heart.
Right at the center.
The Old Testament reveals that evil is not a cosmic accident. It is rebellion of the human heart against God. And then the New Testament arrives and diagnoses just how terminal that heart condition really is.
We see this definitive diagnosis starting with Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7. He is addressing the religious leaders who are highly focused on external purity.
Washing hands in pots and pans.
Yeah, they're concerned with washing hands and avoiding physical contamination from the outside world. But Jesus completely dismisses the idea that evil is a physical substance outside of man that can infect him.
He flips it.
He says that it is from within, out of the heart of men, that evil thoughts, murders, deceit, and our word kakoētheia proceed. He takes the philosophical debate about the origin of evil and settles it. The origin is internal. It is not physical matter. It is not an evil world soul. It is the human heart itself.
Jesus locates the rot on the inside. And then the Apostle Paul takes that diagnosis and writes what might be the most devastating confession in ancient literature.
Romans 7.
Yes. In Romans chapter 7, Paul basically takes a sledgehammer to this whole Greek idea of self-improvement. He shatters the Socratic idea that knowing good means doing good.
Because Socrates said if you know it, you do it.
Right. Socrates said that if you just educate people, they will choose virtue. Paul says, look, I have the education, I know the rules, I agree with the rules, I desperately want to follow the rules. But he finds the kakon, evil, is the only reality he can actualize on his own.
That is a hard realization.
He writes, the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. It is a total collapse of human optimism.
Paul unmasks the fundamental contradiction of the human condition. He proves through his own experience that the intellect is not enough to overcome the defect in the will.
The will is broken.
Yes. His inner consent to the law of God shows he recognizes what is good. His inability to perform it shows that his nature is bound to a different law. He calls this the law of death. The human default state, what Paul refers to as the flesh, is completely incapable of producing true righteousness.
Total inability.
Exactly. From a Reformed perspective, this is the reality of total depravity. It requires a total reliance on divine grace. Without the intervention of the Holy Spirit, any belief in human self-perfectibility is just an illusion. Man is at the end of his tether. His will itself is corrupted.
You know, we live in a culture obsessed with self-optimization.
Oh, completely.
We have apps for mindfulness, endless routines for productivity, and shelves of books on how to fix our flaws through sheer willpower. It is a very Socratic way of living.
Trying to educate ourselves out of the problem.
Right. But it is also incredibly exhausting because we constantly fail to meet our own standards. I wonder how freeing it might actually be for you listening right now to accept Paul's verdict.
It changes everything.
Instead of constantly trying to self-optimize and failing, what happens when you just admit that your human will is fundamentally broken? What if admitting total inability is the prerequisite for experiencing any real freedom?
Admitting that inability is the core requirement for receiving grace. As long as you think you can fix the problem through better education or stricter habits, you remain locked in the frustrating cycle of Romans 7.
Spinning your wheels.
Yeah, you are relying on the flesh to cure the flesh. The New Testament writers recognize this inherent bent toward kakon so clearly that they even view human government through this lens.
Like in Romans 13.
Right. In Romans 13, Paul describes the state, the civil authority, as a divine tool specifically designed to restrain the evil in the world. The state does not exist to make men perfectly good.
It can't do that anyway.
No, it cannot. It exists to carry the sword and limit the damage caused by human malice. It is a sober recognition of the reality of evil in the present age.
Recognizing this brokenness is the first step. But the New Testament does not leave us in despair. It provides a historical, objective solution. We see some incredible specific applications of the root word kakos in the lives of the early believers.
I do.
It starts with the crucifixion itself. The Gospel of Luke records that Jesus was crucified between two kakoi.
Kakugoi.
Yeah, that is the word for malefactors, criminals, or literally evildoers. The Savior of the world is executed sharing the exact fate of the wicked. He enters fully into the reality of human punishment and death.
And the use of kakugoi is highly significant for the narrative. Christ does not remain aloof from the human condition. He subjects himself to the ultimate consequence of kakon, which is death, under the judgment of the law.
He takes the hit.
Yes. By bearing that guilt, he breaks the power of the law of death. But the New Testament also acknowledges that believers, even after receiving grace, still have to live out their days in a fallen world. This brings us to a fascinating eschatological word used in the text, which is ankake.
Ankake.
Yeah, it comes from the same root, and it means to lose heart, to grow weary, or literally to act badly by failing.
Let's define eschatological so we do not lose anyone. When we say eschatological, we are talking about the end times, the final realization of God's kingdom. But it is not just about the distant future, it affects the present.
Right. The early Christians were living in this agonizing tension of the already and not yet.
Oh, that is a huge concept.
It really is. Christ had already won the victory, the kingdom was established, But the final physical consummation of that kingdom had not yet appeared. Think of it like signing the closing papers on a house.
Okay.
You legally own it, the transaction is done, but you have not been given the keys to move in yet. You are living in the tension between the purchase and the possession.
And that tension caused massive psychological pressure. Jesus tells a parable in Luke 18 instructing his disciples not to enkake in prayer. Paul tells the Corinthians and the Galatians not to lose heart in doing good.
Why the constant warning?
Because they were facing persecution, delay, and the daily grind of living in a world heavily influenced by Kakoētheia. They were constantly tempted to just give up. They were tempted to let the surrounding malice wear them down into apathy.
The Greek usage of the word ankake originally meant to fail in your duties. It was used in military contexts, like an army failing to send reinforcements to the front lines.
Dereliction of duty.
Yes. Paul takes that military word and applies it to the spiritual life. To lose heart is to stop functioning as a citizen of the coming kingdom. It is letting the present darkness dictate your reality. But Paul insists that because they have received mercy, they possess the strength to not grow weary.
They have a new fuel source.
They do. The believer is called to a new reality. This new reality is governed not by kakētheia, the vice that destroys fellowship, but by agape, the divine love that builds it.
If you are listening to this right now, think about the last time you felt totally burnt out. That is exactly what the early Christians meant by enkake. The early believers were not dealing with overflowing email inboxes or the stress of corporate commuting.
Right, different problems.
Very different. But they faced the intense pressure of awaiting a delayed kingdom while surrounded by hostility. They knew what it meant to be completely drained by the surrounding culture. The command not to lose heart speaks directly to our modern exhaustion.
It is incredibly relevant.
When you are constantly bombarded by the malice of the world, whether online or in person, the easiest thing to do is to become cynical. It is incredibly tempting to adopt that kakōētheia, filter yourself just to survive.
But the New Testament calls for a radical endurance based on hope. It is a call to overcome evil with good. Romans 12 says, "Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good."
Which is unnatural.
Totally unnatural. The world without God knows no true doing of good based on divine love. But the Christian community is meant to be the place where the impossible becomes possible. It is the place where the relentless cycle of malice is finally broken by forgiveness and grace.
That is a massive contrast.
The contrast is absolute. Kakētheia destroys human fellowship. Agape restores it. This completely resolves the ancient Greek dilemma. Evil is not a metaphysical substance you have to escape. It is a relational brokenness that has been healed by the historical work of Christ.
We started with the classical Greek philosophers treating evil as an abstract concept. They thought it was a glitch in the material universe or a simple lack of education.
Which is a decent attempt for their time.
Yeah, but then we watched the Old Testament prophets turn that idea on its head, revealing a sovereign God who uses disaster to discipline a rebellious nation within a covenant. And we landed in the New Testament, which diagnoses the fatal flaw right in the center of the human will, offering divine grace as the only cure. The ancient texts give us an incredibly precise vocabulary for the darkness we experience and a precise solution.
The progression of the word kakos demonstrates a massive shift in human self-awareness. The abstract theories fall away, leaving the reality of the human heart before a holy God.
Nowhere to hide.
Nowhere. Recognizing kakōētheia as an internal disposition rather than an external accident forces us to drop our excuses. We cannot blame physical matter, and we cannot blame ignorance. We have to confront our own nature and our need for rescue.
Let's leave you with a final thought to I want today. We talked about Aristotle defining Kakoētheia as the habit of assuming the worst. We compare that to a cynical social filter.
Right, taking everything for the worse.
Think about the modern digital landscape you inhabit every day. We exist in a social media ecosystem that is literally engineered to thrive on outrage.
It runs on it.
The algorithms reward conflict. They practically beg you to read the worst possible motives into the words of strangers. They train you to instantly categorize people as enemies based on a single post. Our technology is monetizing Kakoētheia.
That is a terrifying reality.
It is. What if the most radical countercultural thing you can do today is not to win an argument online? What if the most radical thing you can do is to actively refuse the algorithm of malice? In a world desperate for outrage, what would happen if you deliberately decided to assume the best?